Imagine working for 40 years to build a magnificent palace. You lay every brick with your own bleeding hands. You spend thousands of sleepless nights perfecting the architecture. You sacrifice your health, your comfort, and your pleasures to ensure that this structure is flawless. And then, on the day of the grand opening, you put the key in the lock, turn it, and the entire building instantly collapses into dust because you forgot to secure the foundation. This is not a nightmare about architecture. It is a nightmare about the human soul. It is the specific terror of the wasted life. We are terrified of the idea that we could be wrong about our own goodness. We are terrified that we could spend a lifetime praying, fasting, and attending Mass, only to find out at the very last second that we missed the mark. This terror is not hypothetical. It is documented in one of the most important spiritual books ever written, The Ladder of Divine Ascent by St. John Climacus. In the 7th century, in the unforgiving heat of the Sinai Desert, St. John witnessed the lives and deaths of hundreds of monks. He saw men who battled demons and won, but he also saw men who fought the war for decades, only to be ambushed on the final battlefield. He tells the story of a monk, let us call him the Elder, who lived in the deep desert for 40 years. To the human eye, this man was a living saint. He was the gold standard of Christianity. But St. John, with his piercing spiritual vision, saw what no one else saw. He saw that while the Elder was climbing the ladder to heaven, a dragon was quietly climbing up right behind him, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Before we step into the scorching heat of the desert to investigate this tragedy, I need to ask you something. We are building a community here that is not afraid to look at the hard truths of the faith. The algorithm often hides these deeper, more challenging videos in favor of light entertainment. If you want to help us break through the noise and reach souls who are sleeping in their spiritual pride, please take a second right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It is a small act, but it tells the system that this content matters. And in the comments below, I want you to write a prayer that acts as a shield against the very enemy we are about to discuss. Write, "Jesus, make me humble." That simple sentence is the only weapon that can kill the dragon we are about to see. Now, let us look at the Elder. To understand the tragedy, you must understand the investment. This man did not live a comfortable life. He lived in a cave where the temperature would blister the skin during the day and freeze the bones at night. He ate only enough to stay alive, perhaps a few dried dates and hard bread. He slept on the ground. His knees were covered in thick, hard calluses, looking more like the knees of a camel than a human, because he spent up to 12 hours a day in kneeling prayer. If you met him, you would have been overwhelmed by his aura. He looked like a prophet. Younger monks would travel miles just to touch the hem of his robe. They would whisper, "Look at him. That is what a saint looks like. Surely he has a reserved seat next to the apostles." And the Elder knew it. This was the poison. It wasn't that he was faking his prayers, he really was praying. It wasn't that he was secretly eating feasts, he really was fasting. The problem was his interpretation of his own suffering. Every time a young monk looked at him with admiration, the Elder would feel a warm glow in his chest. He would think, "Yes, I have suffered much. I am not like these weak men in the cities. I am a warrior of God." He began to collect his sufferings like trophies. He began to love his own reflection in the mirror of his reputation. He wasn't doing these things for God anymore. He was doing them for the image of himself as a man of God. This is the sin of vainglory, or spiritual pride. The Church Fathers call it the woodworm of holiness. A woodworm is invisible. It enters a piece of solid oak furniture and eats it from the inside out. The furniture still looks strong. You can polish it, you can admire it. But the moment you put weight on it, it snaps because the inside is hollow. The Elder had spent 40 years polishing the outside of his soul with long prayers and severe fasting, but on the inside, the worm of pride had eaten away the core. He had convinced himself that God owed him salvation. He viewed heaven not as a gift of mercy, but as a salary he had earned through his hard work. He had forgotten the most fundamental rule of the spiritual life, that we are unprofitable servants. St. John Climacus watched this dynamic with horror. He realized that the devil had stopped tempting the Elder with lust or greed years ago. Why? Because the devil is smart. He knew that if he tempted this old monk with a woman or a bag of gold, the monk would instantly reject it. It was too obvious. So, the devil changed tactics. He stopped attacking the monk. Instead, he started agreeing with him. The devil became his cheerleader. He whispered, "You are doing great. You are the holiest man in Sinai. Look at how much you fast. You are invincible." And the monk listened. He drank the poison because it tasted like holy water. He didn't realize that by accepting the praise of his own mind, he was feeding a dragon that was growing larger every day in the corner of his cell. As the 40 years came to an end, the elder fell ill. The time of his departure was at hand. The other monks gathered around his deathbed, expecting to see a holy transition. They brought candles, they brought incense. They were ready to witness the soul of a patriarch fly straight to the bosom of Abraham. They were expecting a scene of peace and light, but St. John Climacus describes a scene of terror. As the elder's breathing slowed, his eyes suddenly snapped open. He wasn't looking at the brothers. He wasn't looking at the cross on the wall. He was looking at something invisible standing at the foot of his bed. His face, which had been calm for decades, twisted into a mask of absolute shock and horror. The brothers couldn't see what he saw, but St. John tells us that the veil had been lifted. The dragon that had been hiding in the shadow of his pride for 40 years had finally stepped into the light. It was no longer whispering sweet praises. It was opening its mouth to collect its property. The monk began to sweat, not the sweat of fever, but the cold sweat of a man who realizes too late that he has been walking toward a cliff with his eyes closed. He tried to speak, to argue, but the dragon had a list not of sins he committed, but of the virtues he had corrupted. The tragedy we are witnessing here is the tragedy of the almost saint. It forces us to ask, if a man who prayed for 40 years can be deceived, what about us? What about us who pray so little? In the next block, we will witness the interrogation. We will hear the specific dialogue between the dying monk and the invisible accuser, and we will discover why his good works turned into dust in his hands. We will see the horrifying reality that you can be religious and still be lost. The silence of the cell was shattered not by a scream, but by a conversation that only one person could hear. The younger monks, who had gathered to witness a holy death, watched in confusion as the elder began to argue with the empty air. He turned his head violently to the left, then to the right, his eyes wide with a panic that contradicted 40 years of stillness. To the onlookers, it looked like delirium, but St. John Climacus tells us it was an interrogation. The dragon was not there to attack the monk physically, it was there to audit his soul. It was holding the ledger of the monk's life, and it was reading the fine print that the monk had ignored for decades. The elder gasped, his voice trembling, "I fasted. I ate nothing but bread and water for years. I denied my body everything." The invisible accuser replied, and though the brothers couldn't hear the voice, they saw the impact of the words hit the monk like a physical blow. The dragon whispered, "Yes, you fasted. But why did you fast? You did it so that the other monks would whisper about your discipline. You did it to feel superior to the brother who ate cooked vegetables. You fasted to feed your pride, not to starve your passions. Your stomach was empty, but your ego was full. That fast belongs to me." The monk, sweating now, grasped at his rosary, the beads worn smooth by millions of prayers. He shouted at the shadow, "But I prayed. I spent nights in vigil while others slept. I recited the Psalms until my throat was dry." The shadow countered, colder and more precise. "You recited the words, yes, but who were you talking to? You were talking to yourself. You loved the sound of your own piety. You treated prayer as a performance, and your own mind was the audience. You didn't seek God's face. You sought the feeling of being holy. You prayed to a mirror. Those prayers belong to me." Desperate now, the elder played his strongest card. "I am pure. I never touched a woman. I never knew the sins of the flesh. I lived as a virgin for the kingdom of heaven." The dragon laughed. It was the laugh of a victor who knows the game is over. You kept your body clean, true, but you let your mind rot with judgment. You looked down on the married lay people. You looked down on the sinners in the city. You thanked God that you were not like other men. That is the sin of Lucifer. Lucifer was a virgin too, he was an angel. But he fell because he loved his own light. You are not a chaste son of God. You are a proud son of the morning star. Your chastity belongs to me." This is the moment the gold standard collapsed. The elder realized with absolute horror that he was holding a bag of counterfeit currency. He had spent 40 years working for a wage, but he had been paid in vainglory, a currency that has zero value in the kingdom of heaven. He had built a skyscraper of good works, but because the foundation was pride, the entire structure belonged to the enemy. St. John Climacus describes this scene to warn us about the robbery of the last breath. The devil is patient. He is willing to wait 40 years. He doesn't need to make you a murderer, he just needs to make you a Pharisee. He is perfectly happy to let you attend Mass, say the Rosary, and give to the poor, as long as you whisper to yourself, "I am doing so well. I am better than them." That single thought is the drop of poison that ruins the entire barrel of wine. The younger monks watching this spectacle were terrified. They saw their hero, their model of perfection, crumbling before their eyes. They saw him looking at the corner of the room with the expression of a man who sees the executioner raising the axe. The elder began to weep, but these were not the gentle tears of repentance. They were the tears of a man who realizes he has been conned by his own ego. He looked at his hands that had built a reputation of holiness, and saw that they were empty. The dragon moved closer. It didn't need to drag him away with chains. It simply claimed him by the law of affinity. Like attracts like. A proud soul belongs to the king of pride. The elder had spent his life physically in the monastery, but spiritually he had been living in the dragon's court the whole time. The desert, the fasting, the silence, it was all a costume. Underneath the rough habit of the monk was the silk robe of a king who worshipped himself. The psychological horror of this moment is unmatched. Imagine the feeling of realizing that your entire identity was a lie. Imagine thinking you are standing at the gates of pearl, only to realize you are standing at the trapdoor of the pit. The elder looked around the room at his brothers one last time. He wanted to warn them. He wanted to scream, "Don't do what I did. Don't trust your own goodness. Smash your ego before it kills you." But he couldn't speak. The shadow had enveloped him. The breath rattled in his throat, a dry, dusty sound like the desert wind. The vision showed that the dragon didn't violently attack him. It simply opened its mouth and swallowed the monk's efforts. It swallowed the fasting, the vigils, the chastity. It consumed everything that had been tainted by vanity. And when the dragon was done eating the good works, there was nothing left of the man. He had identified so completely with his own image that when the image was destroyed, the soul went with it. Saint. John saw the elder's soul being pulled away from the light, not because God was cruel, but because God is truth. And the truth was that this man did not know God. He knew religion, he knew discipline, he knew theology, but he did not know humility. And without humility, there is no contact with the divine. God cannot fill a cup that is already full of itself. The elder died full, and because he was full of himself, there was no room for grace. As the last breath left his body, the cell fell silent again. The younger monks stood trembling, looking at the lifeless body of the man they had worshipped. They were left with a terrifying question hanging in the air. If he didn't make it, who can? If 40 years of desert life isn't enough, what hope do we have? In the final block, we will answer that question. We will discover the secret weapon that the elder forgot to use, the only weapon that burns the dragon. And we will learn how to check our own souls for the invisible woodworm of pride before it's too late. The elder was dead. His body lay on the rough mat of the cell, looking just as holy in death as it had in life. To the external world, nothing had changed. He was still the venerable patriarch of the desert, but the brothers who stood in that room knew that the reality was terrifyingly different. They had watched a spiritual shipwreck happen in dry dock, seeing a ship that had navigated the storms of the ocean for 40 years suddenly sink while tied to the harbor. The silence that followed was heavy with a specific kind of fear, the fear that comes from realizing that God is not a computer algorithm that calculates our saved status based on the number of prayers we recite. God is a fire, and this fire tests the quality of the gold, not just the quantity. Saint. John Climacus used this moment to burn a lesson into the hearts of his monks that they would never forget. You cannot impress God, and you cannot bribe him with your sacrifices. If you bring your fasting to God as a payment, he will reject it. But if you bring it as a gift of love, he will accept it. The elder had brought a bill expecting payment, and he received exactly what he had earned: nothing. This brings us to the core of the catastrophe. Why did the dragon win? It wasn't because the monk was weak, it was because he was too strong. His strength was his downfall because he relied on his own discipline, his own will, and his own power. He forgot that the devil is an angel of power who can fast better than any human because he has no body, who can keep vigil better than any monk because he never sleeps, and who is chaste because he has no flesh to lust with. If your spirituality is based on fasting, watching, and being pure, you are trying to beat the devil at his own game, and you will lose. There is only one thing the devil cannot do, only one weapon that burns him like acid, and only one posture that the dragon cannot replicate. That weapon is humility. If the elder in that final terrifying moment had simply stopped arguing and admitted he was nothing, the dragon would have vanished, because the devil cannot kneel. We are diving into the deep waters of the spiritual life today, touching on truths that are uncomfortable and that strip away our masks. Most places won't tell you this because it doesn't feel good, but we believe you are here because you want the truth, even when it burns. Researching these texts and translating the wisdom of the Desert Fathers is a labor of love, but it is also a labor that requires resources. If this video has woken you up, if it has given you a weapon to fight your own pride, please consider supporting this mission by using the Super Thanks button or clicking Join to become a member. Your support is the backbone that allows us to stay independent and keep the lights on in this digital monastery, ensuring we can continue to bring these hard truths to the world. So, how do we apply this to ourselves? You might say you are not a monk living in a cave, so you are safe. But St. John Climacus warns you not to be so sure. The dragon of Vainglory does not need a desert. He thrives in the city, in the parish council, and in the comment section. There is a simple test to know if you have the woodworm of pride, a litmus test of the soul. Watch how you react when someone criticizes you. If someone tells you that you are wrong, or corrects you, or insults you, and you feel a flare of rage, or immediately start defending yourself, the dragon is there. That anger is your ego screaming because its image has been scratched. A humble man reacts differently. When he is criticized, he accepts the stone and uses it to build his foundation lower, thinking that even if they are wrong about this specific point, he has done other sins they don't know about. We must change our definition of a good death. We often think a good death is dying peacefully in our sleep after a long life of success, but the story of the elder teaches us that a good death is a death with empty hands. We must arrive at the judgment seat, not holding our trophies, but holding on to the cross. The elder arrived holding his fasting, his vigils, and his reputation, so his hands were full of self, and he couldn't grab the hand of Christ. We must arrive saying that we are beggars and he is the king, acknowledging that any good we did was him doing it in us. This is the prayer that justifies the sinner while the Pharisee is condemned. The tragedy of the monk is a warning, but it is also a map that shows us where the landmines are. It tells us that 40 years of prayer can be erased by one moment of pride, but it also implies the opposite, that 40 years of sin can be erased by one moment of perfect humility. The good thief on the cross had no fasting, no vigils, no reputation, and a lifetime of crime, but in his final breath, he had the humility to say he deserved his punishment and asked Jesus to remember him. He stole heaven while the monk worked for it and lost it, proving that God does not look at the clock but at the heart. Let this story haunt you in a healthy way, making you suspicious of your own goodness. Every time you feel that warm glow of self-satisfaction or think you are better than another person, visualize the dragon waiting in the shadow and smash that thought instantly. Look at the floor, remember you are dust, and then look up at God. Because a saint is not a person who never falls. A saint is a person who gets up, looks at the dragon and says, "You cannot have me. I do not belong to myself. I belong to mercy." Saint John Climacus is asking us the final question. Are you climbing the ladder to heaven, or are you just building a monument to yourself? Check your foundation today before the sun goes down.